Peace Leute und was geht ab? And welcome to my next video. This is the next creepy stories and the story 6 Persuaded. Lego.
It's been 2 weeks since this whole thing started. It all started with a tanker accident. It was all over the news. Everyone thought it was just another oil spill. There were plenty of volunteers, plenty of people wanting to help the poor, defenseless animals. Plenty of victims. Within hours of the tanker accident, it started happening. The animals had gone crazy. They were scratching and biting the cleanup volunteers. They said that it was an adverse effect to whatever was in that tanker. Rescue workers were still trying to get the crew out of the ship. They could hear screaming inside. There were screams to open the doors. But that's when it all went to hell, as soon as they cut the door out. There were 6 minutes of broadcast before it all went silent. 6 minutes of screaming and agony. The ship crew attacked the rescue workers like rabid baboons. They were breaking bones and tearing flesh. The people on the shore weren't faring any better. Those who had been attacked by animals were attacking everyone else. It was worse than any war zone report. It was sheer brutality. And yet, the broadcast still went on for 6 minutes. There were 6 minutes, and then blank faces. Nobody could explain what was happening. They tried to continue with the regular news, the economy, the weather, and a cute human interest story. But they couldn't make us unsee what we saw. I tried to continue with my regular existence, but every time I switched on the news or walked by a newsstand, it was there. This big mystery. They had some explanations. It was an infection or maybe a brain parasite. But it didn't matter. It wasn't the infection we were afraid of. It was them. 4 days after the initial report, the state of emergency was raised. And yet, we've all seen this before. It's in every zombie movie ever. People didn't know who to trust. People were stockpiling food and weapons. Some tried to flee. But it seems every zombie movie was right. They didn't make it. 3 days later, they arrived in my town. I expected moans, shuffling corpses, and dismemberment. But that's where the movies lied. They ran through the streets, screaming. I remember running to my front door as fast as I could, locking, barricading, and doing anything else to make sure it would stay shut. And then I headed for the window. I was on the 2nd story, and I could see the carnage. They were unstoppable. They were aware. A group of them made their way through a building across the street. They jumped straight through the plate glass window. Even the shards slicing through them made no difference. They just kept coming. My barricade wasn't going to hold. I rushed around my flat, grabbing supplies and jamming them into the most secure room of the flat. I went back for one last look across the street, and I wish I hadn't. In a 2nd story window, my face met one of theirs. They knew where I was. I quickly dashed into the room and locked the door. I don't have any kind of panic room or secure basement, so the safest place I could think of was my bathroom. There were no windows, and only one door. It had a lock. I had filled my sink and bathtub full of water, so I could stay for a while. I sat there in the dark room, with the distant screams in my ears. I began to feel like I may have overreacted. It's been 2 hours and no sign of them. It actually got quieter, and I thought they had moved on. Maybe I could leave the room and go to the kitchen. I could grab some food to wait it out. A crash came from the front door. The sound of someone running full force into the door and knocking down the barricade behind it. There were a couple more crashes before I knew they were inside. There were rapid footsteps moving around the flat. A couple of screams and then a bang on the wall beside me. My eyes were open to their widest, even in the pitch black darkness of the room. There was another bang and then another. They knew I was there, and they knew I was scared. This was a zombie nightmare I'd been expecting from the start. I'd nowhere to run. There was only so much time before they would break in. I sat with my back to the door, hoping my extra weight would make it harder for them to get in. Then, it got worse. Why don't you open the door? There was a voice on the opposite side of the door. There were no screams or moans, just a quiet, whispery voice. And then more of them. We've come for you. You'll be happier if you open the door. It's not so bad. The whispery voices became a cacophony of noise, trying to persuade me, to break me, to fool me. I had heard that the moaning of the zombies would drive people insane, but this was worse. A siren call. I sat in the darkness and hoped and prayed they get bored. But they don't get bored, and they don't leave. I managed to use the mirror to peek under the door, only to be greeted by horrible unblinking eyes, blood-smeared faces, screams, and more horrible whispers. That was 2 days ago. I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe it won't be so bad.
And this is the end from the creepy stories. And now come to CNN News. Welcome to the CNN News. And now come the US politics. Michael Cohen, Lego.
It is the second largest economy in the world.
GDP growth is still around 6%. By 2030, we're talking around 48 million STEM graduates.
Why should investors care about China?
The words the media should be using to describe Mr. Trump are generous.
He was the ultimate loyalist,
Principled,
protector, and defender.
kind, humble, honest, and genuine.
The Trump fixer, who said he would take a bullet for his idol, his boss.
They say Mr. Trump's pit bull, that I am his, right-hand man.
Now, in a plot twist worthy of Shakespeare, the fixer has flipped.
I am done with the lying. I am done being loyal to President Trump.
Prosecutors say he has provided relevant and useful information on contacts with persons connected to the White House and his own conversations with individual number one, aka candidate Donald Trump, to criminally influence the election. In more than 70 hours of interviews, Cohen confessed to his own financial crimes and past lies and stands to pay the price, 3 years in prison. But before he goes behind bars, he's going in front of Congress and before cameras, now willing to testify publicly to what he knows about Trump's behavior in business and as a presidential candidate.
I think the public needs to know exactly what happened, and I think that he can shed that light on it.
A betrayed Trump says it's all a lie, the deceit only serving Cohen's self-interest.
Michael Cohen is lying, and he's trying to get a reduced sentence. He's a weak person and not a very smart person.
This man has turned a corner in his life, has hit a reset button, and he's now dedicated to telling the truth.
No longer dedicated to being Donald Trump's mini-me, as he was when he started working for the boss more than a decade ago.
Michael was, I'd always like to say, the Ray Donovan of the office.
I'll take care of it.
He took care of what had to be taken care of. I don't know what had to be taken care of, but all I know is that Michael was taking care of it.
He's the guy that you could call at 3 in the morning when you have a problem.
Do you know stories of Donald Trump calling him at 3 in the morning?
Donald Trump has called him at all hours of the night.
He's not calling now because Cohen is singing, admitting negotiations about Trump Tower Moscow continued during the presidential campaign, while Trump denied having any business interests in Russia, and says he was in touch with Trump's lawyers and White House staff as he prepared a false statement to Congress. And Cohen says, at the direction of the candidate, he coordinated payoffs to women accusing Trump of sexual relations, even releasing a secret recording about one of them.
When it comes time for the financing, which will be some
What financing?
All part of the job.
My job is I protect Mr. Trump. That's what it is.
It's my absolute pleasure to serve you with a $500 million lawsuit.
Often with threats, as in this 2015 conversation with a reporter.
I'm warning you. Tread very lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be disgusting. Do you understand me?
This is also part of the Trump-Cohen method, is you skate on the edge of what's reasonable and maybe even on the edge of what's ethical or legal.
Now Cohen says he's the one being threatened by his former boss.
He should give information maybe on his father-in-law, because that's the one that people want to look at, because where does that money? That's the money in the family.
After that, Cohen initially backed out of his planned congressional testimony before finally agreeing to sit down in front of 3 committees this week.
The President of the United States is essentially threatening his family, which to me is another act of potential obstruction of justice.
Cohen, a sometimes Democrat, first came to Trump's attention after buying apartments in Trump developments, then went to the mat for Trump against one of his condo boards and won.
Trump loved him for it. I mean, that was the beginning of it. And then after that, they became close. It was much more than an attorney-client relationship. It was something much deeper, almost father and son kind of thing.
I will faithfully execute.
But when Trump became president, he did not bring his brash wingman to Washington.
Do you think he wanted to be in the White House, be White House counsel, or?
There must have been a part of him that was dreaming of a great job at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But he's also the guy who not only knows where all the bodies are buried, he buried a lot of them himself. And that, ironically, disqualified him.
Maybe from working in the White House, but not from working with Bob Mueller and testifying before Congress.
And this is the end from the video from CNN News. And we see us in the next video. So Leute, das war's dann auch schon mit dem Video. Wenn ihr noch mehr Creepy Stories haben wollt, dann lasst einen Daumen hoch und ja, schreibt halt in die Kommentare, wie euch denn so die Creepy Stories halt so gefallen, ob sie halt gruselig sind oder nicht, wie auch immer. Ja, vergesst das Abonnieren nicht und vergesst die Glocke nicht zu aktivieren. Und dann bekommt ihr auch regelmäßig eine neue Benachrichtigung, wenn ein neues Video hochgeladen hat. Und wir sehen uns im nächsten Video. Bis dahin, Peace.